Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Happy New Year! Today's video is going to be a book recommendations video based on your college major. I got this idea late last night while I was reading my current read, which I'll be sharing later in this video, and I think blank majors would really love this. So I started typing out ideas of different majors, and I have a good list here that I think would apply to a lot of great majors. And for some context, I am a third-year student in college. I'm an environmental studies and creative writing double major, and I'll be graduating next year. So those are my two majors for now. And I just want to put little disclaimers in this video before I begin with the recommendations. The first one is that I do not claim to be from all of these majors. I do not claim to know all of these majors really well, but I just thought that there were certain elements of these books that it would apply to major studying in, say, biology or whatever major that I'm recommending in this video. So I apologize if they're not 100% accurate to what you would choose as a biology major or whatever. So that's the first disclaimer. The second disclaimer is that I am 100% missing majors in this video. Don't think that this video is the say-all of all the college majors that exist in the world, because it's not. I am just limited to the scope of view that of the majors that I see in my college, which is very limited because it's a small liberal arts college. Compared to, say, a public university that probably has way more majors that are much more specific and that people have experience with, but I do not interact with those. And second reason why there are not a bunch of college, I'm missing some, is because I only chose majors that I could actually recommend books for. A lot of majors, I think the biggest one in this that I'm missing is the business/economics major. I just didn't have any book recommendations for that major, so I just decided to keep it out because I didn't want to just falsely recommend a book that I have not read yet. And I don't know why, but I just haven't read anything in that kind of genre of nonfiction, economics. I haven't read a lot of memoirs yet, which I think definitely focus a lot on business and economics. So anyway, let's jump straight into the recommendations video. So I will be going in these majors in alphabetical order, so of course we start with A, the art major. If you are an art major, I think you will love An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. This book has been compared a lot to Of Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I honestly think, rightly so, it could be compared to that book, especially because of the language, the writing, the storytelling. But this book basically is set in a world where the human and fae kind of coexist, but the fae are not able to do human crafts like paint, bake bread, that kind of stuff. So they hire humans to do that stuff for them, and it's kind of a lavish thing. So they pay lavishly for our main character Isabel to paint these wonderful, beautiful paintings, and she's a painter, and she talks a lot about art in this book. It's really beautiful writing. And yeah, that's basically what kind of happens. I don't want to give away the premise of the story because I think if I say it's ACOTAR, you kind of already can tell what it's about. But I just really love the writing in this book, the storytelling, the way that art was depicted. So I definitely think if you're an art major studying art, you will appreciate this book. Okay, the next major that I'm recommending for is the biology major. So I'm a little biased because biology is such a big umbrella term. It's so hard to really just choose a book. And there are a lot of great science books that I've read, but I'm a little biased because I'm an aspiring marine biologist, so of course I'm going to choose a book about marine biology. But for this recommendations, I have Spineless by Juli Berwald, a book that I read a few years ago that I've recommended to everyone because it is amazing and I love the author. This book basically follows the author's, it's kind of like a memoir, kind of not. It's very much fiction-esque because she does a lot of storytelling, a lot of anecdotal stuff, but this is about her journey leaving the marine science field to start a family and then coming back to the marine science field because of her love for jellyfish. And it's just so beautiful. If you love biology, if you love living things, you will love this book and have a greater appreciation for jellyfish, which, to be honest, a lot of people don't really have this profound appreciation for, which I do. I love jellyfish. So if you are interested in science, biology, definitely read this book. It also talks a lot about being a woman in the science field and how the trials you face and all that. So I definitely think it's good for aspiring biologists. So definitely give this book a try. So the next major that I have on this list is computer science, and for that I have chosen When Dimple Met Rishi by Sandhya Menon. This book basically follows two characters. One is Dimple, who is this aspiring like coder, computer scientist, and she really wants to go to this like coding camp, and then her parents like agreed to pay for it. But what she doesn't know is that she's going to meet the person that she's arranged to marry, which is Rishi, and Rishi like knows about this, and so they meet at this coding camp or this summer program for like aspiring coders. This book talks a lot. I just think it focused not only on the romance but like about being in the STEM field as a woman and as a person of color, which I think was really interesting. So this book is not only quirky and just fun and funny, this is also a really insightful like conversation about being a woman in STEM and what it's like when your parents have different expectations from you from the ones that you have. I definitely think this is a great book for computer science majors, and you definitely love the little like nerdy stuff that's put in there too. So the next book that I am recommending is for the English majors. This was by far the hardest because there are a lot of different types of English majors out there. I myself am a creative writing major, so I'm definitely looking towards the more author area in terms of like what I want to do with my major in terms of like writing. I basically want to write something instead of like going into publishing or going into like literature and that kind of stuff. So for this one, I have recommended Beach Read by Emily Henry, mostly because this was one of my 2020 favorites, so I definitely want to bring it up again. This is definitely for more aspiring writers because I think it's such a good lens into the writing process and how it's like doing that with another person. So this book basically follows two writers in very different areas. Our main character, we have two main characters. I forgot her name. Okay. Oh yes, Augustus. So Augustus is like a literary fiction author, and then January is like a best-selling romance author. And basically one summer they find themselves neighbors to each other in like their summer homes, and they basically challenge each other to write outside of their like what they know best. So Augustus writes romance, a best-selling romance, and January writes acclaimed literary fiction, and they basically both compete to get published first. It's a really great novel, not just about like talking about competition in the literary world. Talks a lot about publishing, talks a lot about the writing process itself. They definitely in-depthly talk about like the writer's block that they get and the process of writing. It's such a beautiful novel. I love the writing in this book. This is just a great novel of like good writing and a quick and easy read. I literally read this on my plane ride back from school one day, like in the summer. So yeah, I really enjoy this book. I think if you're an English major aspiring writer, you'd really love this, but also if you're not an English major and you just appreciate good writing, good literature, I think this is definitely a good book for you. Okay, so the next book I had really fun choosing is for the environmental studies / environmental science major. For this I have chosen The Hungry Tide by Amitav Ghosh. I read this actually for an environmental studies class, so my teacher would be so proud of me right now. But I basically chose this book because, once again, I read it for a class, so I think it applies directly, but this book basically spoke to me as an environmental studies major. It basically follows our main character, who is this marine biologist, again, marine biologist of course, but she basically goes to the Sundarbans, this like tide country island, to survey dolphins, and there she meets a translator and a fisherman, and they go on this journey to find this like rare river dolphin. But what she doesn't expect to find there is to learn the history of the country and like learn about the environmental degradation, how climate change has affected them. The reason why I'm recommending this book is because a lot of really great like climate fiction books and environmental science books don't really talk about like environmental justice and like the consequences of like conservation or that kind of stuff, which I think this book heavily talks about, and that's one of the discussions we had in class. So if you're interested in reading a fiction book about not only about climate change and about how the environment affects the ways in which like humans interact, this book also talks a lot about environmental justice and how people are treated differently based on like the environment that they live in. So definitely check out this book. I loved it so much. One of my favorites of 2020. Yeah. So the next book that I'm recommending is for the fashion majors. I chose this with specifically my sister in mind, my twin sister, who is a fashion design major at a school in New York, so I thought I definitely had to put this on the list, even though before knowing my sister, like, she was interested in this major, I really didn't know that the fashion major existed. But I definitely would recommend The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang. This is a graphic novel, the only graphic novel in this entire video, and the reason why I would recommend it to you fashion majors is because, one, it's about a dressmaker, so yes, it does like directly follow kind of like a fashion designer, but it's a really great story about like friendship and identity. This basically follows a prince, and the prince basically, at night, he loves to dress up in these fancy ball gowns and kind of use a different identity as Lady Crystalia, I believe. He likes to like dress up. So basically his like secret weapon is his dressmaker, Frances. But Frances wants to be this famous dressmaker. She doesn't want to hide in the shadows just being the dressmaker for the prince. So she basically struggles with like keeping the reputation like of her friend and her dreams. And I think that's talked about a lot in this book. A lot of like gender stereotypes are broken in this book. It's so beautiful. It's about friendship. It's about their friendship together. And oh my god, I can't even tell you the art in this book, like the dresses that he wears are literally, as you flip to the pages, it gets better and better, and you just can't help but look at all the designs so closely, and you're like, oh my god, who designed these dresses? They're so beautiful. Yeah, I would definitely recommend this book if you're a fashion major. Okay, so the next book that I will be recommending is basically the basis for this entire video of why I created it. It is my current read right now, and it is for all of you geology majors out there. I actually got my start in geology when I was a first year in college. I took a intro to geology course, and that was like my main course that the school wanted me to focus on. And I learned in that course that I didn't really like geology and I didn't really want to pursue it, but I still have a lot of friends in that major who absolutely love it. One of my best friends, Claire, is a geology major. So the book that I'm recommending for you, Claire, is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This book, the magic system and the like world building is based off of like geology. There are these beings called origins, and they basically have power. They can basically draw energy from the ground, from like the temperature. They can change temperature, all that stuff. It's a really hard, complex like magic system to understand. I still haven't gotten like the basis of it. I'm only more than halfway through, and I realized with this book it's really interesting because it's a high fantasy book, but definitely you learn more as you read along. So like you don't know initially in the beginning everything about this magic system and everything about this world, but you learn more as you keep reading. So I am still learning, but this book definitely like presents a lot of those topics in geology where energy is redirected, and these beings can basically like direct energy and to prevent earthquakes, and that's what like their main use in this world is they prevent a lot of natural disasters from happening. That's their like service. And yeah, I just really love this book right now. I swear, when I read the words hotspots and fault lines, I was like, oh, my geology major is coming. My geology knowledge is coming in. Sorry, I'm not a geology major. But yeah, anyway, I love this book. I'm excited to read more about how like the earth and the environment plays a role in this magic system and in these people's lives. Okay, so the next book that I will be recommending is for all of you history majors out there, and that book is Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. I've talked about this book so much on my channel. It's one of my favorite books of all time, like hands down. This is definitely, I have like multiple copies of this book, but I'm showing this new copy because it's beautiful. But if you're a history major, I really think you'll enjoy this book. It talks about a very, not underrated, but definitely something that I don't see talked a lot about in like fiction. I like see a lot of World War II novels, all that stuff, but what this book is takes place in the early 1900s. It follows a Korean family living in Japan during the time of the Japanese occupation of Korea. It's super interesting. They talk about like the relationship between the Japanese and the Korean people. I personally love this book because I went into it not knowing anything, like prior knowledge of history. I am not a history major. I don't study history, but I was still able to understand the kind of animosity and understand certain things in this book, and then I think after that doing some research on it really enriched my reading of it. So if you do know a little bit of knowledge about this time period and about what happened like in Japan and in Korea, I definitely think it'll enrich your reading experience, but it's definitely not necessary. But if you're a history major, I definitely think you'll love this book. The writing is so beautiful. I love Min-Jin Lee so much, and I'm very excited to recommend this to you. So the next book that I'm going to be recommending is for mathematics majors, and the reason I didn't even think I would have a recommendation for this, but this book is just so memorable that I just remember it having like including math. So the book I'm recommending is An Abundance of Catherine by John Green. I remember this, I read this like a long time ago, probably 5 years ago, but it was so memorable for its inclusion of like math, like actual math in the book. This book basically follows our main character, Colin. I forget every main character's name. Our main character, Colin, and he's like this child prodigy, really smart person. He goes through a string of breakups by these women named Catherine. So at the end he goes on like a road trip and he creates this like theorem of love or romance or something like that, and he basically uses it to understand like his bad luck in love and why he has been broken up with a bunch of times and how to find like his true love. It's a really interesting book. I know a lot of people aren't a fan of it. I definitely think for me it was really hard to understand all like the math stuff, so I think if you're a mathematics major and you're really into that, I think you'll like this book. But other than that, it's a quick read, really kind of funny, and I think you'd like this. So the next book that I'm recommending is for all of you music majors out there, and the book that I'm recommending is Wintersong by S.J. Jones. I have to give credit to my boyfriend, who is actually a music major. We met at college, and he loves this book. He loves it so much that for his birthday, I actually sent him like a rose made from the pages of this book. So yeah, Wintersong is a book about our main character Liesel, who must travel to the underground to save her sister from the Goblin King because he took her sister. The main character herself is, I think she's like a composer, or she likes to compose music, and that's kind of her thing in this book. I personally wasn't a fan of this book, but he really loves it, and he definitely thinks it spoke to his like music side, his love for creating music, his appreciation. There's a lot of great music in here. I also remember, I think there was like sheet music that it was attached to this, I believe, but basically, yeah, I definitely think if you like music, if you like the way music is talked about in books, you'll really love this book. And yeah. The next book that I'm recommending is for all of you neuroscience majors out there, and it is Transcendent Kingdom by Gyasi. This is actually my favorite book of 2020, so that's why I'm recommending it in this video, but it also more specifically follows a PhD candidate in the neuroscience like major. She's a neuroscience PhD candidate, and basically our main character is this PhD student, and she's gone through the death of her brother from a heroin overdose, and then she's now living with her suicidal mother. So in the lab, in her PhD work, she is studying reward-seeking behavior in mice, and she's trying to use her science. She's trying to find a scientific basis for the suffering that she's seen in her life. It's a really great novel about the intersection of science, religion, and like grief and love and loss. It's so beautiful. I have never read Gyasi prior to this, but I definitely think I will read more. Just because of the writing of the characters too. This definitely has a lot of great lab scenes that I personally have like associated with because I usually work in a lab, so I was really interested in like the science side of it. So if you're a neuroscience major, I definitely think this is really interesting conversation about like the neuroscience, like the science itself used to like apply it to real life things. So I definitely think you'll enjoy this book. Okay, so the next book that I have here is for all of you political science majors out there. The book that I'm recommending is The Voting Booth by Brandy Colbert. This book I recently read in 2020 as well, and I think it's a really great book for political science majors because I definitely think you can't study political science without studying like voter suppression and like the politics of like racism and all that stuff. So I definitely think this book touches so much upon voter suppression, racism, and what being a black voter in America is like. It's also a YA novel, so it's really digestible, really informative, really just, it's insightful. It's just, that's what it is. And it taught me a lot of stuff that I also didn't know about, like privilege and all that stuff. So I definitely think if you're a political science major looking to like open your lens to literature by like black authors, talking about politics, this is definitely a book for you. And the final book in this recommendations video is for the sociology majors. I actually took my first sociology class this past semester. I took a class called environmental sociology, and I really loved it. I think it was very different from any of my environmental studies classes before, but the book that I'm recommending is The Power by Naomi Alderman. I definitely think this book is a very interesting conversation on like like human behaviors, human interactions, more specifically like gender roles, that kind of stuff. This book basically follows a world, a future in which women or young girls get the power like to cause like really like they have this power of like I don't know exactly what it is, but they have the power to cause pain. So it's basically like women are in power in this world. It's really crazy. It follows the perspective of these different girls. I think it comments a lot on like human behavior, human nature, and like the interaction of like men and women in society, I think, like as those roles. I think it's super interesting. As if I were a sociology major, I would definitely be interested in that conversation. I think I don't know like a lot about the sociology major, but I definitely think this book opens a lot about like human behavior and all that stuff. So yeah, I definitely think you'd like this book. So yeah, those were all my recommendations for this video. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below any other majors that I was missing out here and any other recommendations that you have, even for any of the majors that I've mentioned here. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.